Okay, friends, so in this video, I just want to go a little bit deeper into some dimensional analysis to tie into our last couple answers. Um, it was kind of fun changing miles per gallon to gallons per mile. That was actually a lot of fun, and it's going to prove to be very useful as we move through not just the rest of this course, but Math 105 and beyond. But really, the numbers we got at the end of that may have been a little bit obnoxious. For example, city mileage for the Subaru, 25 miles a gallon, which ended up being exactly 0.04 gallons per mile, 4 hundredths of a gallon per mile. It's hard to imagine what 4 hundredths of a gallon looks like. We know what a gallon looks like. There's a gallon of milk. But what does 4 hundredths of it look like? I mean, you have to cut that into 100 little tiny pieces and then pick up 4 of them. I think it's going to be easier. Instead of that, let's look at a tablespoon. Okay, tablespoon, and this actually has olive oil in it, so it looks kind of like gasoline already. So what I'm going to look at is all the numbers we just got from the Subaru. So that was 0.04 gallons per mile for the city. How many tablespoons of gas would that be? Well, if you work the math, and I encourage you to do this, it's actually really, really good dimensional analysis practice. 0.04 gallons of gas is equivalent to about 10 tablespoons. How about the highway mileage? Now, the highway mileage, remember, it gets better highway mileage. The highway mileage was 32 miles a gallon, and we calculated that as being 0.003 gallons per mile. So it's going to take fewer tablespoons, and it takes about 7.5, which actually makes sense. Since it takes 0.003 is about 25% less than 0.004. The amount of gas should be 25% less, and it is, because 25% of 10 is 2.5. Take that away, and you get 7.5. I hope that was okay for half a tablespoon right there. I did my best with my limited graphical skills. All right, now that's all we did in the notes, but I decided to have some fun with this. Let's go to our Tahoe. Here's our 2000 Tahoe, which gets horrendous mileage. I forget exactly what the mileage is city and highway for this. I looked it up to do this math, but here's how much gas it takes in the city to go a mile with a Chevy Tahoe. Now you can see why we don't drive it any more than we have to, because it's terrible. And then you make it even worse by hooking trailers to it, and it just goes downhill from there. Highway, it does a little bit better. It does. I mean, a little bit better. But, it's crazy. The highway mileage on the Tahoe is still worse than the city mileage of the Subi. So they're definitely not made for their fuel efficiency. Okay, so then I just kept looking. I said, what else is out there? The Tahoe's pretty bad. What car has the best mileage that I can find? The Tesla Model 3. And the Tesla Model 3 city mileage, check out how much gas it takes to go a mile in the city with the Tesla. I think it's 1.8 tablespoons of gas. How about highway? Now, highway was 1.9 tablespoons of gas. And this might throw you for a loop and be like, wait a minute, Sean, wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense. If you look at these other cars, the highway mileages are better than the city mileages, because we mentioned in the video, highway mileage tends to let the engine go more efficiently. Well, what you'll learn as you study, if you study, or when you study hybrids, which is what the Model 3 is, or a Toyota Prius or something like that, in the city, they very often use their electric components of their engine, which uses far less gasoline than the gasoline components of the engine. So you'll notice that hybrid cars do better in the city than in the highway, which is why they're not, and we'll study this more in Math 105, a hybrid is not always the best solution for everyone. But it is fascinating how good mileage it gets. For years, I always used my wife's 2005, I think, Schwinn Hope scooter as kind of the pinnacle of mileage. But even her scooter takes more gas than a Tesla. I think Jen's scooter gets about 100 miles a gallon, whereas the Tesla gets something like 130 miles a gallon or something like that. So anyway, I just decided to keep looking, because then I'm like, okay, so these are the really good mileages. These are kind of normal mileages, maybe. I don't know what normal means. This is pretty bad. And then I just started goofing around. I'm like, oh, how about a 747 jet? How much gas would it take a 747 jet to go a mile? And as it turns out, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,300 tablespoons of gasoline to go a mile. It's staggering. As a matter of fact, it's so ridiculous to even think about that in terms of tablespoons. I decided to go back to gallons. It's about 5 gallons of gas to go 1 mile. which is, again, crazy to think about. And then what's even crazier, if you think about the speed that planes attain, about 600 miles an hour cruising, it burns 50 gallons of gas a minute, which is, again, kind of mind-boggling. We have a 60-gallon aquarium, 50-gallon aquarium, 50 or 60-gallon aquarium in our living room, and that much gas would go through that plane every minute, which is hard to think of. But then you have to think about it like, well, it also carries hundreds of people. So how efficient is it? How efficient is it? Well, we'll get to efficiency in a minute. There are some way, way more efficient things than passenger airlines. So my favorite sports car to drool over when I was a teenager back in the 80s was the 1986 Lamborghini Countach, and I loved it in the color yellow. Never actually was able to purchase one of these things, never will be, and that's totally fine. But I decided let's use that as our next little gas amount. So this is how much gas it takes a Lamborghini in the city to go a mile, and this is how much it takes it on the highway to go a mile. Turns out, from all the Googling I did, the 86 Countach with a tuned engine gets 10 miles an hour highway, 10 miles a gallon highway and 6 miles a gallon city, which interestingly enough is very similar to the mileage that semi-trucks get, which is fun to think about because a Countach takes you and maybe one other person around, whereas a semi is able to take you, maybe a few other people, and a load of cargo across the country. So given the option, I think I'd be happier with this thing burning diesel fuel than the Lamborghini. Okay, moving on. This is one of my favorites, and I think it surprises a lot of people. A diesel locomotive. To go 1 mile, a diesel locomotive uses this much gas. 1/2 of a tablespoon, which is one of the craziest, mind-bending facts that I know. Something like 450 miles per gallon. The efficiency of a freight train is staggering, and I really, well, that explains why they're used to move so many things. I just wish we had more passenger rail available to us here in Central Oregon, which we have zero. So, and one last one, of course, because I'm a bike commuter. And that's my car. That is my 2019 Surly Midnight Special, and it requires literally 0 tablespoons of petroleum to run, unless you want to count pasta. In which case, I think you should count pasta, honestly, because let's consider it that is a fuel source. But it requires absolutely no gas to run. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of a fun little aside, kind of looking at different vehicles and how much gas they take in something that's a little bit easier to see, like a tablespoon. Okay, let's get back to the notes.